Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And this is a Behind the Sights very special episode. We've got a conversation with somebody who serves at a very special place right between the public and the media and the box office.
Paul Dergarabedian is a man who's been doing this for quite a while, and people who kind of pay attention to where the numbers for movies come from might have heard his name before or seen him pop up on the news talking about box office. He's now working at Comscore, which is it's kind of a statistics company. They do statistics for a whole variety of industries, but he specifically is focused on movies and theaters and just kind of all of the tracking of all the how movies are doing every week, right?
And every Sunday, this guy zealously, meticulously, he and his team document performance of films each weekend and send out a report and an email to industry insiders in the media. And we happen to be on that list. We are followers of that. And we get this email every Sunday morning. We know exactly what Paul is doing every Sunday morning, right before he hits the media to do interviews about performance of films. And we thought it would be an interesting conversation to bring Paul on the show today to talk about his work and, frankly, his love of movies.
Well, what do you say we jump into that interview then, Pete?
Let's do it. Let's jump right in. I think you're going to like this, people. Here we go. Paul Dergarabedian. Paul Degarabedian from Comscore. Man, welcome to the show.
Andy and Pete, I am honored to be here. Thank you.
We're thrilled to have you. We love movies. We know you love movies. We always, at the end of our show for each movie, we talk about statistics of the movie and how it did at the box office. I know that's a big thing in your life. And so we thought it'd be great to get you on the show and talk to you a little bit about you, about your company, about your love for movies, all of that.
Yeah, I love it. I'm a big gabber. If you know me, I love to talk, particularly about movies. And I've listened to your guys' stuff, and you just get on a tangent or start riffing. And that's what I'm all about, because when you love movies and numbers and all that, it's pretty exciting way to merge those two things. So I'm all yours.
Fantastic.
As long as you want me here.
Well, first off, kicking us off, give us a sense of Comscore. You're working at Comscore, and what is Comscore? Who is Comscore? What is the kind of the goal of the company?
Yeah, the company is a cross-platform measurement company. So we measure everything from movies, obviously, to digital platforms, to set-top boxes, home video, you name it. We measure it. So we're just in the business of compiling all this great information from all these different sources, big screens and small. And we also track social media. So we're on the cutting edge of tracking the conversations surrounding movies on social media. So it's all about where the users are, what are they using, what are they listening to, what are they watching? What are they all about? And so we really are in the business of having our finger on the pulse of what people are watching, whether it be on the big screen in a theater or on their phone or on their computer, whatever they're doing. Also measuring web traffic for virtually every site in the world. So it's sort of this all-encompassing world of measurement of all things entertainment, though my particular emphasis has always been on the movie side, but I also get involved in the TV side as well. There's a lot going on with small screen providers and small screen platforms. So it's all interconnected. And what Comscore does is make sense of all that and put it all together in one place.
I can only imagine how much data you guys collect, and just like how many bits of information you guys cull to pull out all these things and find ways to give us useful information out of it.
Yeah. And I mean, just for example, we measure 110 to 120 million set-top boxes and recording that information, yeah, it's insane. And when you look at the number of online transactions, digital transactions, conversations and all that, it's something like in the billions of pieces of information every year. So it's pretty incredible stuff. But at the heart of it is great content, right? So you got to have something to talk about, to measure the box office, to figure out the number of downloads, to measure the social media impact in the conversation. So all that comes together in that world of Comscore.
Where do you fit in with other sources of information like Box Office Mojo or the numbers or places like that? Are they competitors of yours, or are you a source of information for them? Or
well, we are the ones who get the information directly from the movie theaters and then provide that to the movie studios. So we are the source of all the information, and we work with the studios and the exhibitors to make sure that all that is working perfectly. When you see other sites quoting data, essentially it's coming from us because we are the ones at the point of sale around the world. So we're talking about countries all over the world. We're tracking box office everywhere in real time, and then the studios use that information, and that's where they send out their studio reported information to the world, but it's based on our platform. And we were Rentrack, and you may remember the name Rentrack. Rentrack merged with Comscore a couple of years ago, but Rentrack is really the entity that is the box office authority and has that, that direct connection to all the movie theaters around the world. So it's point of purchase, direct to us, from us to the studios. And then what I do a lot of, obviously, is talk to the press to get that information out there and disseminate it to all of those who are interested. But I look at every website. Hey, it's totally cool. If people are passionate about box office and there's these other websites, hey man, I think that's great. Why not? The more people are talking about this stuff, the more passionate they are. There's room for all of that, but our data is the data that is the engine that drives all of that pretty much.
What's your, I don't know. I don't want to get too much into this. I know it might sound like a sidetrack, but I'm really interested in the sort of industry relationship, like how you fit relative to like Nielsen, because I know there's so much hue and cry about Nielsen, and it's kind of this. We actually had a comment in our Slack group when we said we were having this conversation, and they were referred to as farcical. And I'm not that I want to necessarily get into name calling and put you in a weird spot, but how does that relate? What are they doing with their data? How's that compare?
Well, Nielsen, obviously a huge name, does a lot of measurement. Obviously, I just think for Comscore, our methodology is just something that we're very proud of. It's something that is so well vetted and so well thought out that I just don't know how you could find a better source for that kind of info. But yeah, everybody's got their place. I'm not going to say anything, negative about anybody. It's just that Comscore has this all-encompassing view where if you're tracking TV and movies and website visits, and social media conversation, we run the gamut of all that. So it's unique in that way to Comscore that we track all of these things in an all-encompassing way. And they all relate to each other in some way. I'm sure every one of us has been on every platform today, if not in a movie theater, which I'm sure we all will this weekend. So that's how it all comes together for Comscore.
Now you talked about how you kind of are the face of Comscore, at least as far as the statistics with movies go, and how you go out and talk to the press and everything. Looking at you, let's take a step away from Comscore for a second and just look at you. Who is Paul? Now, make sure I'm saying this right. Dergarabedian, is that right?
Perfect.
All right. So
I've been actually repeating that as a mantra like all day today, all day. The first time I said it to Andy like 10 minutes ago, I screwed it up.
It's perfect though. I tell you, I have been on live radio where I've had a host call me back afterward and apologize, saying, "Hey man, in 25 years of doing this, I've never name on air. I'm so sorry." I'm like, I'm sorry to be the one to break your track record, but no, you said it brilliantly. So I get it. And I'm not sensitive about it. Geez, the name's got 13 letters.
No, it's fantastic.
That's awesome.
It's one that stands out for sure. Yeah.
Totally. How'd you land in this side of the business in particular? I mean, as a fellow film nerd.
Well, I went to Long Beach State and got my, believe it or not, radio, TV, and film degree. And later the students protested and were like, "We just want film and television on our degrees." So now I have 2 degrees from the same university. So I always loved film. I love doing radio, by the way. That's one of my favorite things. But at that time, very few people have radio in their degree, which that's a badge of honor to me. I love that. But the way and then I went to USC, Annenberg School for Communications, and then promptly couldn't get a job in the movie industry at all. I wound up at a architectural firm down in Irvine.
Congratulations. Welcome to the world.
Welcome to the world. Welcome to the real world. I think I was 30 years old at the time. And I was like, I've arrived, man. So what I did was I basically bought a video camera and started going around the country filming buildings and interviewing the occupants of the buildings. So I created my own job. And then I used the video toaster. I don't know if people remember that edit footage. I mean, I'm old, man. I'm like, and so that's sort of where I got to at least exercise my love of film and at least filming something, because in school we were doing projects and all that. But really the way I got literally into this business is seeing the chart in the LA Times of the box office top 10, looking at the name at the bottom of that chart, which was Exhibitor Relations Company, and literally playing hooky for my job at the time and going over there and asking the elderly gentleman who ran the business if I could have a job. And he gave me a job on the spot. So I just saw the name, went over there, quit my other job the next day, and got to work over there. And within about 2 years, to his credit, this wonderful gentleman, he was in his 80s at the time. He worked in vaudeville, man. I mean, this guy was the real deal. And he started telling me, I do CNN, but now you're going to do it. And my heart dropped. I'm like, oh, no, I'm not doing that. You know, I'm not going on TV, no way. But then he just threw me into the deep end of the pool. And I just want to say, if you have a great mentor, that's everything. Because he really, without this guy, he really started me on my path. But it was just a passion for movies. And I just figured, like, if I'm not going to be a filmmaker, which I really wanted to be, like probably all of us who love film, but realized I didn't really have the necessary tools to do that, I figured I'd go to the business side of the matter. And when I saw the box office charts, I thought, well, that sounds like a good fit for me. And that was 25 years ago, and I'm still doing it. And I've never stopped. I've been and I started my own company at one point, and then that company was acquired by Hollywood.com. And then after Hollywood.com, I came over to Rentrack, and now Rentrack is part of Comscore. So 25 years later, I'm still doing it. I still love it. I still get up every Sunday morning to do the box office. In 25 years, I've only missed 2 Sunday mornings of doing box office. Wow. I won't go into why. But I literally, I mean, that's my Sunday morning, 6:30 a.m. to about noon, just working on the box office and talking to the press. I mean, that's really a lot of what I do.
Now, where did your love for movies come from? Can you trace it back to a key moment in your childhood, or where did it all start for you?
That's a great question. I think all of us have that moment, and movies are so key in so many people's development. And I know that for me, it was 2001: A Space Odyssey. When that movie came out, I was just a kid. I was like 7 or 8 years old. And my father, who literally was a rocket scientist, took myself and my 3 sisters, my older sisters, to the Cinerama Dome in Hollywood, which is now the ArcLight, beautiful theater. And the dome is still there, designed by Buckminster Fuller, the geodesic dome, and saw that movie, and it blew my mind. And and having a dad who was in the space industry, and I had met all the astronauts at the time. I had sort of a charmed life in that way. It was like meeting the rock stars of the time. And that's what really got me into it. It was really my dad. He loved movies. We would go see Guns of Navarone at the Cinerama Dome, and they would have these dioramas out front with like guns or submarines or whatever it was. It was really the time of the roadshow movies, where going to the movie, you might even have a hard ticket. I remember even doing that for Apocalypse Now at the Cinerama Dome. Like, it was really an event, and the ticket was really expensive at the time. It was like $5 or something, for a hard card ticket. And that's what really got me into it. And I love filmmakers. I have filmmakers in my family. I respect the filmmakers like no other. You have to have a real passion for it. So for me, it's not just about dollars and cents. It's about that, but it's also about the love of film. And when I listen to you guys talk, I mean, I get it. I'm right there with you. If we were at a bar, drinking whiskey, we could probably talk for hours and hours about movies, because that's what's at the heart of it. But it really comes from, every time I see a movie, I think of my dad. He passed away about 10 years ago to the day, and he was the one who really got me into it.
Well, and as a rocket scientist, it seems like you got some of the love of numbers from him also.
I didn't. I was the worst math student in the free world. I cannot tell you the frustration of my otherwise mild-mannered father. His name was Paul, also, who was a PhD, Phi Beta Kappa, went to Caltech, all this, and his dumbass son. I mean, I was the worst in math. It must have been such a tragedy in his mind. But yeah, ironically, I work with numbers all the time, but it's certainly not the kind of thing that my dad was doing with the slide rule and all that. I mean, I don't have to do the slide rule for this, but yeah, it is, the apple really not only fell out of the tree, it rolled all the way up, really far from the tree.
It became a pear.
Yeah, it became a pear. It became a banana, like that So yeah, I was the worst student. I did not like school at all. I'm lucky I graduated high school. But what happened was my dad drugged me again in a rare moment of him being like forceful, dragged me to Long Beach State and made me sign up, to go to college. And when I discovered the radio, TV, and film handbook and those classes, that's when things took off for me. I got on the dean's list. I went to graduate school. I could have never imagined that when I was ditching high school in my Trans Am, driving to Taco Bell with my friends, just not wanting to go back to school under any circumstances. Honestly, I don't know how I graduated, but once I found something I loved, which was the study of movies, and I had some great professors over there, that's when it all clicked. So if you find something you love, you'll excel in it. If not, you're just like tuned out.
Yeah, it's just amazing. And it just goes to show how many opportunities there are in the industry for people. I mean, there's just such a great variety of work that can tie into something that you love. So I think that's a great thing to have discovered. I think that's just fantastic.
That was really the key for me, was just finding something I loved. And again, having, I had professors who literally brought James Cameron to campus before we even knew who he was. And this was back in I want to say 84, 85. And he brought the first Terminator movie to show us, and nobody had seen it. And then we stood outside the classroom after seeing the movie, just talked with him for about 20 minutes. Man. And I had no idea who he was, but that's a great professor. Turned us on to, we saw Ghostbusters before it came out. We saw all these really cool movies. We learned about the business as well. So it was all this dovetailing of the business side with the love of movies and filmmakers.
That's cool.
It was cool. It was a different time. It was, there was no social media, no cell phone. I mean, I act like I'm 100 years old. Kids, there was no, there were no ATMs. There were no cell phones, no screens, no small screens that you could talk into.
It was probably a film print that they were carrying into the class too.
There actually was. There were physical film prints. That's a beautiful thing.
It really is. Yeah.
And so it's just like you guys, it's not just about the movies, right? It's about even just the emotional side of it. There's something about it. It's like any kind of art where you just kind of fall in love and you start then studying movies. I remember when I went through my Laserdisc run.
Oh, hallelujah.
Oh my God. I bought every Criterion.
Oh boy.
I bought all the special editions, and now I think they're holding my door open over here. But oh my God, I would just pour over the commentaries, the scripts that were included. I mean, I love digital downloads, and they offer a lot of that stuff on the digital downloads, but there's something like, I'm a vinyl album aficionado too. And I'm the old geezer who'll sit there, open up the gatefold on the album, start reading the lyrics and singing along and reading who the engineer was and all that.
Hallelujah.
And for me, that's what movies are about, man. I would go through there. I mean, I remember I went to Show East many years ago when Thelma Schoonmaker and Martin Scorsese brought Casino to the convention. And I got to tell you, that movie in its first version, which we saw, which I'm sure had stuff that they later had to cut out. I mean, that movie was really intense.
Yeah.
It was great though. It's one of my favorites. But I walked right past Martin Scorsese and I went up to Thelma Schoonmaker and I'm like, you are my hero. Like and she was like, how do you even know who I am? And you know how I knew? I saw her in the extras on a Criterion edition of a Laserdisc of one of Scorsese's movies. And I just knew who she was and I worship her. So that it's cool when you meet your heroes like that. And that was really cool.
It's the thing I think people don't understand about, like, when you really, when you cross the transom, right? When you cross that gap from the guy who just goes to movies and enjoys going to movies, but, goes to movies because that's where the dates go, to the guy who's reading the liner notes and doing all the things. They don't understand why movies can hurt your feelings when they're not great.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yes, I do.
I'm telling you, we before we started talking, as this whole Justice League thing came up, before we pushed the record button, that movie hurts my feelings. I haven't even seen it yet, but it hurts my feelings. I'm gonna go see it this weekend. I'm gonna contribute. My dollars will be in your chart on Sunday.
Yes,
but
I like that.
It already hurts my feelings because I love it so much. I'm so passionately connected to this whole thing, and I just don't think people understand us, man.
No, that's a really interesting point. I actually feel hurt as well when I really excited to see a movie and it doesn't measure up, or the buzz on the street is that it doesn't measure up or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that's really important because the way you feel about a movie is important. So the difference to me between like and loving a movie could be $200 or $300 million worldwide. So there's some movies that people didn't love. They didn't, there wasn't that passion surrounding them, but yet they get to almost 900 or, almost $1 billion. Had people loved the movie, then I think it pushes it over the top. And, for studios, do you want love or money? Well, the best is to have both, right? If you have take, for example, The Force Awakens, that was the perfect and there's other examples too. Yeah, right. A great movie. You just came out of there on a high, but also
look what's going on with Thor right now. Look what's going on with Ragnarok.
Thor is just a blast. Yeah. I mean, I'd pay double for that movie because the experience I got.
It was so fun.
Don't tell anybody that, but I would. I think the best movies of this year, Logan is in my top, maybe my top 10 of all time. I loved Logan. Spider-Man Homecoming was another one that reinvented the genre in a way. Thor took a concept, and I love the nimbleness of these filmmakers where they can say, we're going to take Logan, this character, in a different direction. And it wasn't just about making it R-rated. They were using the R-rated or the R rating not to shock you, but to take the character where that character really needed to go. If you're a hard drinking, hard living, guy who's trying to hang up his spurs, you're not going to go PG-13 with that. But Mangold did it in such a great way. I mean, I love that movie. I actually will say, and this may sound like heresy to a lot of people because we're down 5% on box office this year. We had the lowest grossing summer in 20 years. We had one of the lowest August grossing months in 20 years. We had one of the worst Octobers ever. But I will tell you, this year, I've loved and bought more of the movies, which is my example of when I love a movie or how I manifest loving a movie. If I buy it for my home viewing, that's when I know I love a movie. I have bought more movies to watch at home over and over this year. Logan among them, Split, Get Out, It, I thought was great. Wonder Woman was awesome. I mean, I could name American Made, I thought was great with Tom Cruise. There, in my opinion, despite the downturn in box office, there were some, I can't cuss on air here, but there were some freaking great movies this year. Well, maybe I could, but there were just some amazing movies this year. But that gets lost when, a lot of people, and I'm not naming names, but a lot of people like to jump on the fact that the box office is down. At the end of August, the sky was falling. It's over. People don't want to go to the movies anymore and all that. And then what happened in September? We had the highest grossing September of all time. Yeah. It's cyclical. It's product driven. That doesn't mean that there aren't outside forces. I mean, the industry does not want to wind up like Tower Records, which was $1 billion company 2 years before it went under. I mean, you have to be aware of the outside forces at play, be aware of them and adjust and be malleable to either market the movies better, to make it so it's not just about event movies that are going to drive people to the theater, but small movies too. Make every movie an event. So I don't have all the answers. I just know that, there is a change in the weather here and all the signs are there. So it's time for, if people are worried about the film industry or the theatrical side or going to the cinema as an art form or as a way to go see movies, it's not going anywhere, but it does have to evolve.
What's your take on a movie like, this is last year, Miss Sloane, Jessica Chastain? There's a movie that the guys on another one of the shows we do here on the next reel, Trailer Rewind, did a review of Miss Sloane. And by all rights, that's a terrific movie that was absolutely and dramatically underrepresented in terms of box office. How did these, what happened? What was the perfect storm there?
Yeah, well, I think the perfect storm is that adult dramas often get lost There's something where if it's not a super, like this year, for example, horror movies and superhero movies just absolutely killed it. Almost all of them did very well. A lot of the middle of the road dramas, not middle of the road by their quality, just, a mainstream drama or an introspective drama or a movie that appeals to people over 30. A lot of those just fall flat because I think first of all, there's too many movies being released all at once. And a movie like Miss Sloane, if it doesn't have some kind of, a crazy title with a great hook or something like that, you have to seek those movies out. You have to take a chance on them and realize it's not just all about these big bombastic movies, that some of the best movie going experiences with the greatest actors are movies like Miss Sloane. But if you look on paper and you say what the movie's about, who's in it, what's the title, it doesn't exactly scream big box office, but there's a lot of movies that have been like that, but were nurtured through great release dates, coupled with platform releases, meaning, opening a movie in a couple of theaters or maybe 4 theaters, building the buzz, and then slowly and carefully nurturing those movies and getting the buzz building, getting the consensus from the critics and others, and then building those to a crescendo of strong box office, maybe getting $100 million out of a film that in lesser hands might have only done $25-30 million or less.
I can only imagine how complicated it is on the end of the distributors trying to sort all that out as they're looking at their options and they're trying to figure out, okay, so what's the right strategy for this? And do we have the right trailer for it? And there's so many elements that go into the way that a film gets released. It's just more and more complicated with so many different platforms. And
would you say that a movie like for example, this is another one that stymied us, is Blade Runner 2049? Would you say that's
movie.
Right? Stunning. It was fantastic, and yet it feels to me like it's one that's going to go down as not having met expectations from the business side.
I look at that movie like Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, and 10, 15, nobody liked that movie when it first came out, and then years later it's seen as a masterpiece. I love that movie. I also loved Alien Covenant that was earlier in the summer. That one didn't do as well as I had hoped for. Both of those movies I loved. I mean, they put it all up there on the screen. Blade Runner 2049 for me was a transcendent experience like the first movie. And on the big screen, it was just, oh my God. I mean, people argued it was too long or whatever. Look, if a terrible movie is too long, that sucks. But if a great movie is a little long, let it go, man. Just enjoy it while you can. And I thought it was, and Denis Villeneuve, one of the greatest filmmakers working today, I think. And that's part of it too. When I hear the pedigree of a movie, okay, so if Ridley's not going to direct it, but Denis Villeneuve is going to be directing it, I'm cool. We're good. We're all, we're fine. I realize Ridley can't do direct Alien Covenant and then, direct Blade Runner 2049. But some of it's marketing, some of it's just the time. Remember, there's also other movies coming out and this is all obvious, there's sporting events, there's things going on in politics. There's, it might be an unperfect storm for certain movies when they open that they don't get that kind of attention. But if you went down the checklist, unlike we who love movies, a lot of people don't know Blade Runner. I mean, believe it or not, it seems to me almost impossible. I mean,
those people are barbarians.
They're crazy. I don't know where they get this. They shouldn't even go to the movie. They should have their
don't deserve it. They should.
I actually had somebody tell me that they thought that movie was about hockey. And people had to pull me off the guy. I'm like,
I've never heard that in my life. Are you kidding me?
Right now. No, I'm not kidding.
Blade Runner.
I mean, it wasn't, whatever. It wasn't Blades of Glory. It was, it's Blade Runner. Anyway, so that, just sometimes some titles are less accessible than others. And sometimes those are the best movies for us who love them. And God bless the people who are willing to put up the money, which was considerable for that movie. And, we talk the talk, but when you put up $100 and whatever million it was for that movie, when, maybe the upside was not going to be that big, but you still do it anyway, man, swing for the fences. I mean, it doesn't cost me any money. I mean, except for the movie ticket. And I love that movie. So sometimes it's about making art that stands the test of time and not just the opening weekend box office.
I got another trend question that I want to jump in here, Andy. And I feel like I'm totally
it's fine.
sidelining.
Don't worry, go ahead.
Because you have a nerd question I really want you to get to. But I am deeply interested in your take on the Harvey effect, the Kevin Spacey effect. I mean, here we have all the money in the world, and Ridley making some incredibly bold choices financially to replace Kevin Spacey as a result of the sexual assault issues. Is this becoming something we need to keep an eye on from the box office perspective? Is there a Spacey Harvey trend that's going to impact
I hope not. I mean, I can understand, and by the way, I've stayed out of this whole thing completely because it's just not within my wheelhouse. I don't even like to comment on it. But what I will say is that the filmmakers and producers generally know what's best for their movie, and if they're looking at this and saying, whatever is going on here, we have to fix this. Otherwise, this movie that people have spent probably the better part of a year or more, tons of people worked on, really, passionately worked on for all this time, all the fellow actors, everyone, above the line and below the line who worked on that movie. Sometimes you got to make some really tough choices. Now, sometimes it's just about moving a release date because it's not going to work or the movie's not ready. And that used to send a red flag. So nobody wanted to do it. But in this case, I think they made the right choice because sometimes there are things that your movie cannot transcend either through marketing or the greatness of the movie. And that may have been one of those instances, but it's certainly not a positive situation for Hollywood in any way, shape, or form, and for any industry for that matter. It's a very unfortunate situation. And hopefully we won't see it affect any future movies, but every day we're hearing new things. So who knows?
That's the scary part. That's the scary part. And here we are. I mean, 6 weeks out, right? And I was in the theater this weekend, and there we go. There's a trailer, and there's Spacey on the big screen. My heart broke a little bit for the team that's scrambling to make this right. Well,
they must be editing day and night. They must be working furiously to get it done. And sometimes that's what you have to do. There've been other instances of movies, not for this reason, thankfully, but where actors or actresses had to be replaced, and they're pretty adept at doing that. But that is a pretty short time frame. But you're talking about a master filmmaker, a production team like no other, and I'm confident they can get it done.
Yeah, and really state of the art technology. I mean, it's unbelievable what they can do if they, what they're at least able to do.
That's right.
Andy, I'm sorry.
That's right.
No, I was just going to throw in there, and then there are films like I Love You, Daddy, Louis C.K.'s film that the world may never see. Now, who knows what's going to happen with that one?
That's right. And the saddest part of that is, again, the people who, by the way, I was talking to a filmmaker friend of mine today because, I like to surround myself with people with more talent than I, who can actually make movies rather than just watch them like I do. But we were talking about the fact that, you work just as hard on a movie, whether, when you drop that movie into the marketplace and it gets terrible reviews or great reviews, I would argue there's the same amount of work that goes into it. Nobody's on a set thinking, oh, this movie's going to get a 1-star review or a low percentage score or whatever. So there's people, it's like a company, right? But it's a temporary one. You're all working together towards this one goal. And it takes a lot of people to make a movie. And when you work on that movie, you, particularly if you're the writer, director, whatever, the ultimate goal is to have that movie seen by other people. But with this situation, this unprecedented situation that's going on, some movies are becoming casualties of that. And it's really unfortunate for all the people who had no wrongdoing in the scenario.
The I Love You, Daddy is only a little bit different because of the sort of nauseatingly parallel story that it's telling.
That adds an additional layer onto it, no question about it.
So movie statistics. So you've got one side of them where you've got the budget and how much the studio spends on the prints and advertising and all of that, which they often try to hide from all of us. On the other side of the movie statistics, you have, all the people buying tickets. You have, but that even gets broken down into number of screens it's playing on, the different formats that it's in, like 3D or IMAX, how much the ticket costs in different places, the country where it's getting released, the form of its release, even the year of its release ends up kind of affecting it. Those are just like internal factors. Then, of course, you have all the nearly impossible external factors, like, are there wars that started, or giant TV shows that premiered a certain weekend, or like we just talked about, the Harvey factor, or other things happening in the world and entertainment that could affect a movie's release. So with all of this stuff that you have coming your way, how do you guys decide what information to use when you're tracking these movies and reporting on their successes and failures?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because for some movies, the per theater average could be the highest of the weekend, but that movie might be number 10 or 12. So nobody talks about it. And that's why we are, starting to, we're thinking about doing another chart, which we've done before. But I think in today's world, there's so many movies like from Fathom events, these Met Opera, but also other kinds of events, film-based events that are, maybe over the, one night during the week, but they make tons of money. I know that iPick is doing like magic, like live magic, and doing very well with it.
Wow.
But it's not a movie, but it's
heard of that.
Actually, you get Doctor Strange up there. I mean, it could be really cool. But it is very interesting what you're saying, because what we do is we talk about the top 10. That's a given. We do that every week. But when you start digging down, we have a product called Post Track, which digs into the demos, the demographics and the psychographics of the audience. And it's really comprehensive. And you get a really strong idea on the first night of release how people are responding to the movie. So the press is very interested in that, because sometimes the numbers, they're interesting, but we've heard those all before. Okay, $11 million preview, a $30 million first day, $110 million, whatever it is. But when you start digging into those numbers, that's when it becomes more interesting. But I will tell you, most of the time, it's fairly rudimentary, unless, because a lot of this is just going out to the general, viewer or reader. And it shows like, it's people like you guys who get in more to the minutia, which is wonderful, because that's where the magic is. That's where the cool stuff is. I mean, when you look at the 3D portion of sales on a movie, or you see that like a movie that you might think would appeal more to men actually appeals more to women. And so sometimes through the demographics, you may find out that, women love horror movies almost more than men, or that, older moviegoers like one kind of movie, but not another. That stuff is really kind of interesting. So it is kind of hard to figure out what to fixate on, what to present. So every Sunday I write a commentary that just kind of goes into each movie, kind of interesting tidbits that I find. And for example, like this weekend, which I think it will, Justice League earns over $100 million this weekend, that's a $100 million opening just 2 weeks after Thor had a $122 million opening. That'd be the first time outside of the summer where two movies in November in the same year earned over 100 million in their opening weekend. It's happened in the summer. It's never happened in November. So that's kind of interesting to me. How does that happen? And it shows you the power of superhero movies this year. Every single one has done well. I'm hoping Justice League, we have to go see it, decide for ourselves, but I'm hoping it follows in the footsteps of Logan, Guardians 2, Spider-Man, Wonder Woman, and Thor. So we'll see how that all plays out. Horror movies, for example, they have just been killing it, no pun intended, this year. From from Split and Get Out to It, Happy Death Day, Annabelle Creation,
Jigsaw, right?
Jigsaw, even.
Yeah.
You look at those horror movies from this year; they've all done really well. I think part of that is the youth audience, as they say, loves horror, always have. And it just particularly struck a chord because younger viewers who technically couldn't buy a ticket on their own, because it was, after all, rated R. The fact that it was rated R made it more appealing. It was forbidden fruit. You go to school on, Monday or Tuesday and say, I saw it. And they're like, oh, wow, how'd you see that? Or who'd you see it with? How did you sneak in? Like, how did you get in to see the movie? So there has to be, for me, some level of event ism, if that's even a word, or an event idea tied to a movie, whether it be, hey, it's a superhero movie, Aquaman and Wonder Woman are in this superhero movie, so you have to go see it, or it's R-rated and you're not supposed to see it. That makes it an event too. How do you make things cool for the younger audiences who everyone says are staying away from the movie theater. I don't think they are, but you just got to make movies that speak to them. But that also means, I believe, having executives either hiring or at least talking to the not typical person, like the younger person who can tell you really what's cool and what's not. Not that everything should be done by committee and, all that, but even going to Twitter, if you put out a movie and there's a big criticism about something from everybody, right? This is free advice. It may be only worth that price, but it's free. No, but in some cases, it might be worth its weight in gold. If people are telling you, we like this, we don't like that, that's like, people pay to have audiences watch a movie and tell them. Well, this way you get it for free. You just go on the internet. Everyone's an expert. Everyone's a critic, as they used to always say. And you can learn a lot from that. And I think the filmmakers and the studios who are smart look at those comments and take them to heart. Not all of them. Some ideas are going to be ridiculous or won't make sense for a future movie. But there's a lot of great information out there that studios and executives and everybody in the business can learn from that. Though, of course, your vision for your movie should stay pure. I don't believe in changing something just for marketing reasons, because then everybody smells a rat on that. It has to be organic, but at least be informed as to what the audience is saying.
Well, and I think that's actually pretty important when it comes to even just the test audiences. I think test audiences can be beneficial to the filmmaker if they understand how to listen to it and kind of take that advice, but modifying stuff maybe, that they were already looking at possibly not working or things to change.
Right.
I think that can actually help make a better film. It's when they kind of start losing track of what it is and they start changing things just because, they didn't like this, let's get a new composer in, let's tack on a whole new ending, and all of a sudden you watch it and it's like, wow, they really just made that 10 times worse.
You can destroy a movie that way. It'd be like, like they say, too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
If you have too many people getting their hand in it, then you're going to destroy it. But if you bring in a really brilliant chef to kind of help you out, or collectively, some really smart ideas that may come from a test audience or even from the Twitter sphere or social media, why not give it a shot? Now, if you do that and then everybody hates those ideas, well, then, I don't know if you can win. But remember, too, it's an art form. There are no right answers. And when you start treating movies like widgets, then you have a real problem. But on the other hand, if you're just creating movies that are super esoteric, have no appeal to anyone other than yourself, well, then that's also a problem. But that's the coolest movies, or the ones in my mind that really work, is something like Logan, which I'm going back to because obviously I loved it. But that's a movie where they really took some risks. I mean, the way that children were portrayed in that movie, the peril that kids were put in. I mean, on paper, you'd be like, oh my God, you can't do this, right? And having the anti-hero who we all, are rooting for. On many levels, that's a movie that a studio could have said, no, you're going to make it PG-13, because if we go R, you're going to alienate the audience and we won't have as big a box office. But because Mangold and company were so pure, and I've watched the behind the scenes on that movie, of course, in their vision, and so steadfast in it, the movie, it was baked into that movie, all that love and organic love of the material, and it just really showed.
Well, this is what I'm hoping we're going to see. And I think Marvel is actually, interestingly, doing some really interesting things with these properties, right? We have Logan, we have Deadpool, where they're again pushing the boundaries and making sort of an adult-oriented, violent comedy superhero story. We're seeing genre within genre now, and I am looking forward of course I'm looking forward to Black Panther. I'm
absolutely
very eager to see that movie, and I love what Taika Waititi did with Thor. But New Mutants is one I'm probably more excited than anything else, because again, now we get to see another kind of horror. What happens when we have that sort of horror thriller munged together with this superhero
film,
property?
Yeah.
I think that's really exciting.
It is really exciting. And that's the best part of all this. When you have filmmakers given enough latitude to do something really cool and studios and production companies willing to go along with their vision. And you notice too, there's a lot of filmmakers, and I love this, directors' names who come up who aren't the directors we all know. And it's not the same people coming up, although it's starting to now because there's this new wave of directors like Taika Waititi and others, Patty Jenkins, who we've known for years. But I mean, this is now where these, and Colin Trevorrow, who did Jurassic World, you have filmmakers who often worked in a smaller, on smaller types of films, being given the reins of these huge movies, but they're bringing a humanity to those movies. Now, that doesn't mean that's always going to work. But certainly when you
Star Wars.
Exactly. Exactly. So, but it doesn't always work. But when it does, that's pure magic. So, and even a movie like Get Out, which I absolutely love that movie as well, you could tell that came from a really authentic place. When I went in to see that movie, I purposely didn't want to know anything about it. I went into an early screening, and I'm like, wow, this is a watershed moment. It's a movie that kind of defies categorization, and I think is one of the best films of the year. And again,
Absolutely.
and by the way, in that first quarter, you had another one of my favorite movies, believe it or not, Beauty and the Beast. I love that movie. Why not? I don't just like R-rated, hard movies, that really test the limits of your ability to watch and all that. Sometimes these, classic musicals that are just done kind of in the old school way, that can also be really appealing. And by the way, it's still the highest grossing movie of the year in North America with $504 million that Beauty and the Beast made. So that movie just caught on. It was a true 4-quadrant movie, played to everyone, grandma, the kids, everybody. And then, we were talking about head scratchers earlier, American Made, just a brilliant movie. I mean, the directing, it was Tom Cruise, like Tom Cruise of old. But that's a movie that just didn't, I think sometimes people have a lot of baggage, and after The Mummy, I think it was tough for that movie to cross over, but it's still one of my.
That was pretty close too. Yeah, that's a.
Yeah,
good
they were
point.
like right on top
Mummy
of each
was-
other.
It's one of my. Oh, they were close, but the American Made was again one of my favorites of the year. I've encouraged everyone to see it when it's on home video. I'm buying it. So again, that's my true test of whether I love a movie or not. But when you take chances and it works, you can get the best movie ever. But conversely, you can take chances and, it can just be a train wreck. But again, I give every filmmaker credit for going out there and trying.
Yeah, it's such a tricky game just trying to figure all this stuff out. It really is. And I mean, it really boils down to, kind of these fickle audiences and what they're going to actually go see. And you never know. It's always like this gamble, this great guessing game.
It's a huge guessing
that we
game.
all
And
love so much.
Think about it this way. What if, if you have a car and it's the same model and you're making it every day and you're selling this, and maybe every 7 years you create a new one, you're essentially selling the same thing over and over. With a movie, you're selling a brand new, freshly minted product every weekend. That ain't easy, man. You can't be the fan. I mean, think about that for a minute. Like, that's not an easy thing to do. Every movie is like a brand new product. It may be of a similar genre to something else, but particularly in this specialized or indie world, it really is a brand new thing that most of the time sequels are rare in the indie world. And that's a wonderful thing generally. But like, 3 Billboards is out there, Lady Bird, there's some real, Killing of a Sacred Deer. There's a lot of movies out there that the specialized distributors, that's not just do a Hail Mary, spend a bunch of money and brace for impact on opening weekend. No, you got to open it a few theaters. Then you got to figure out how well is it doing on a per theater basis? Then decide where in the country might respond to that movie particularly and start slowly rolling it out. And then at the same time, trying to get social media buzz going on the film, get the critics on board who are very important to the health and success of most indie movies, unlike their big budget brethren who just mainly key off of big marketing, a big opening weekend, and a huge amount of buzz. To me, the real heroes are the folks who love movies so much that they take a chance on these smaller budgeted films that are completely cut from whole cloth, and they have to figure out, like, in real time, every day of the first 3 weeks or even a month of that movie's release, how they're going to expand it into the marketplace, how they're going to get the most out of it.
Yeah, kudos to A24. We talk about them quite a bit on the show.
They do great stuff.
But also Neon, The Orchard. I mean, they're all really just distributing some really unique films, and it's great to have them out there doing that.
It's great.
There's a one of our listeners sent a comment or a question for you over on our Slack group. What do you think that this ever-increasing focus on box office means for the industry, where sometimes these original ideas are struggling to be heard amidst all these endless sequels and prequels and remakes and reboots? Because, I mean, existing IPs, they are so much safer. And, I don't know, did it stem from kind of the corporatization of the studios, the blockbuster craze born in the 70s? Where did this all come from? Do you have any sense?
That's a great question, because I'm torn all the time. Because what do? I'm always talking about box office, and I can't just say to every person, but I love movies too. It's like, maybe like I'm putting a number on your movie or on this movie, but I love movies. I think it just comes from a fear of risk. If the whole sequelization of the entire world came out of this notion that if it worked the first time, it'll work the second time. And there's already a built-in familiarity with the subject matter, the characters, or even just the title of the movie. But again, if it comes from an authentic place and it's great, I don't care if there's an 8, 9, or a 10 next to your movie. It's not about categorization. It's about quality. But I agree with the person who's asking the question. Sometimes it makes it then harder for less commercial movies to get greenlit, or to even get noticed, or to have the marketing muscle put behind them. Some of the best movies cost less to make than it would to market them on a nationwide basis. So it's hard to get them noticed. But it's sort of a chicken and the egg thing. How do you get a small movie noticed if it's a small movie and you can't market it everywhere? But that goes back to the Orchard and A24 and the other, specialized distributors who really have turned this into a science and an art, and also a matter of good taste, figuring out which movies they want to get behind. So there's a lot going on there. But yeah, I don't like seeing it where everything seems to be, created in a sausage factory because the cheapest ingredients are available. I want cinematic fast food. I also want cinematic fine dining. We live on both. I love seeing a big, bombastic, over the top movie where I check my brain at the door. I also love seeing movies that make you really think, might make you cry or laugh or whatever, and really move you. But all movies to me have an equal shot in terms of once you see them in getting into your heart or making you feel something, but they don't all get an equal shot in getting presented to you or being available. I've heard this for years, where I used to get calls, like people yelling at me like it was my fault. Like, I want to see this movie, but it's only playing in New York and LA. I'm like, oh man, if I could, I'd fly it out there for you.
We can call you now? That is awesome.
No, they don't call me anymore. My number's, it's off the grid. But people used to call me when I worked at Exhibitor Relations Company back in the 90s, man. I get calls from people irate. I'm like, I feel your pain. I wish, if I lived where you lived, because you can read about these movies in the national press or whatever, but if they're not available to you, that's tough. But believe me, those indie distributors, specialized distributors, they will find you eventually if the movie's performance in the short term justifies a long-term commitment to more dollars, more marketing dollars, and getting it out there.
Yeah.
Well, that's, it leads to another sort of side of the question. That is that of theater owners, right? And the role that the theater owners and the chains are having in sort of deciding so you may have heard my birthday is on Monday, and it's a national holiday.
I heard about it.
So yeah, it's kind of a big deal. And you're supposed to take the day off and see movies all day. That's what you do
Everyone should do that.
Everyone should do that. Right. I figured you'd be a supporter.
Oh, totally.
I scroll down my theater list, my local Saturday. I go into Fandango, I scroll down, it's all the same posters. It's all the same posters. And I've seen them, or I'm going to wait and see them when they're in home. I know there are other great movies out there, but I also know that there is this trend. All of the theaters in my area have been completely retrofit. All of the theaters now have the great big seats with they're all the electronic recliners. They're all trying these fantastic things to get me to come in to see the Atmos conversions. They're spending a ton of dough to make the food better and have a wait staff in the big adults only sections. I mean, they're really doing the yeoman's work in changing the nature of cinema, but how much is that impacting their decisions not to bring in the movies that they know aren't going to be aren't going to help them pay back this investment?
Well, do you have another hour? Because I mean,
you now have 90 seconds, Paul.
Thank you. That's a great question. I got to give it up for, I live in near Westlake Village in California, and there's a Cinépolis out here. And this isn't exactly the indie movie side or the specialized side, but they have a thing called Handpicked, where they show, I saw Clockwork Orange there on the big screen, Dirty Harry there on the big screen. Every week, Big Lebowski, Fight Club they just showed. I love that. And that's a big chain. I mean, these are these are the reclining electronics or electric seats, the bar, the great food. You push the button, you're like in first class on an airplane. You get all that stuff brought to you. So there are people passionate, as long as there's people passionate about cinema, who work.
And about curating that experience.
Great.
Right?
That's the word, curating that experience. What I would hope for more of the big theaters that have a lot of screens in their multiplex, just devote one to a small movie, even if it's one that's on home video now, or at least was much talked about, because I feel the same way. I'll go look for tickets and I'm looking for one of those smaller movies. And that means you have to support your local, I guess, you'd call it art house theaters, who may not have all those amenities, but show
man, our
movies.
art house. I'm in Portland, man. I go to my art house film, and I'm going to get angry letters, but I might be sitting in a bathtub like a clawfoot. It's hipster and cool, but not for 2 hours. You know what I'm saying?
Well, not only that, but I mean, it's like for me, it's like I know I have to drive at least an hour to get there. It's just on the other side of town.
If you have to reach that far to get to it, that's not necessarily a good thing. And that's where, for me, the small screen, even though this is sort of heresy, but I think it applies to some smaller films, play those day and date. In other words, if there's a film that's only going to be in 4 theaters nationwide, why not let people discover that film on iTunes or wherever it is?
Absolutely.
And I don't know that the exhibitors should be afraid of that. I know there's always this fear of a slippery slope towards day and date on Star Wars. Well, that is not going to happen. But and every filmmaker I know, they want their film on the big screen. I mean, and I respect that totally. But if there are movies that I've seen that played in one theater in Pasadena, which is pretty far from where I live. I've gone and seen it, even though it was playing on the small screen the same night. There's movies like that where every once in a while you'll have a film like that, but that's more the exception. But I think there has to be a way for independent film to have a platform, a place where, and this does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all, but at least if I can't see it on the big screen, and maybe I never will be able to in my town, I would even think the filmmaker would want you to be able to see it. Because if nobody sees it, it's like the, tree falling in the forest.
Absolutely. Just getting the eyes. I mean, that's the thing. You want people to have the experience, and I think that's just such a critical part of it. So
yeah, it is. And I know for a lot of filmmakers, they will hold out till they get on the big screen, and some people will, 4-wall or rent out the theater and show their movie on the big screen. And I think that's awesome. But you ultimately, unless you're just making the movie for yourself, sometimes I think you may have to compromise and have a small screen release. But hopefully out of that or in concert with that, you can have a big screen release as well.
I want to jump back into financials for a quick sec. Just as far as historical data and information on our show, we try to, for each movie that we talk about, we try to kind of talk about the financials, the budget and its box office and all that. But it's always tricky because I'm always trying to balance it for inflation and kind of, compare, or it gets really tricky if it's a foreign film and I'm trying to, balance foreign currencies, and it just gets really crazy. But, we do look at how profitable a movie is compared to its cost and all that. We also have this, we've decided it's a brilliant comparison that everybody should use. It's called the adjusted profit per finished minute.
Oh, I like
APPFM.
That's right.
You
like
can
it.
use that. Yeah,
Trademark.
It's good.
Yeah, we
trademark Andy Nelson.
That's right. Where you take a movie and reduce it to how much it cost or how much it profited per minute.
Per minute.
It was one of those things we started talking about this. I can't remember what caused this conversation or what we were talking about specifically movie wise, but we learned that Disney's movie Tangled, which is a short film, cost almost as much per minute as Avatar did.
Wow.
Right?
Sorry, not cost, but the adjusted profit.
Cost as much.
It was the adjusted profit per finished minute. Sorry, not cost, but it's
Profit,
like when you look at how much those two films made, it was like mind boggling. It's like God, but Avatar was like so long and Tangled was so short. So, but they spent so much money on it.
I think this is the new new normal.
Well, we came up with this because it's like, there's really no perfect way to track a film's overall success over time, or at least we haven't found one.
It is really, you are not alone, my friends.
Yeah, it's tricky.
I deal with this all the time. And generally, you're right. I used to go through hell trying to get budget figures. Now some studios will just put it out there so they can get ahead of the curve and control that message. But, the profitability of movies is something people love to study. Also, I've been, a lot of people say, well, why aren't you adjusting for inflation? It's kind of BS to compare a movie today with an average ticket price of whatever, 10, 12 bucks to a movie from 20 years ago. And that's a valid point. And that when we talk about record-breaking box office like we had in 2016 of $11.4 billion, that doesn't really hold because of the, cost of inflation. But I would argue that the fact that we had a record-breaking year last year is really impressive considering the amount of technology inflation that's gone on. In other words, when all you had was movies and TV, and before that, just movies and maybe the radio and sporting events during the day, there were 60, 70 million people a week going to the movies right after World War II. Then TV came in, that dropped a little bit. Then we went to Super Panavision, VistaVision, all that to differentiate the in-theater experience from the home TV experience. I think I've got lost in the weeds here, but but it is a very daunting thing. I just look at it this way. If you have a movie that cost $8 million to make or 15 million and it makes 300 million or 600 million worldwide, I would say that's a winner. I think it's tougher to figure out the losers because oftentimes on those studios are, understandably reticent to give out the budget figure because the profit margin is going to be so low. But when a profit margin is really high, like on most of these, the Blumhouse movies, they're known for that. They're famous for their profit margins. That's something to crow about, but the opposite really isn't. But when you have a really expensive movie that doesn't do well, it lends a lot of credence to the idea that just throwing money at something doesn't make it a better movie. And in fact, sometimes the simplest movies, and I've talked about this in terms of the dark universe, I would be told, and I'm not originating this idea, but I've heard this idea floated around that like Blumhouse, if they did the classic Universal monster movies in a smaller setting with more independent filmmakers, boy, you could have some really cool movies that could be super creepy and scary and make a ton of dough. But that's just, back of the napkin kind of hoping.
You mentioned some trends of things that have happened over the course of the history of cinema, like, the real widescreen or the different sound formats. What are some of the other trends that have kind of drastically affected the overall box office in the history of cinema one way or the other? Yeah,
well, I mean, there was a lot made of the home video revolution in the early 80s, of which I was a huge part with my Betamax.
There you go.
And still have it, although I don't think it works. I think that, may have impacted things a little bit. But I always say that, the only thing that can really hurt movies is either there have been periods where the movie theaters had to be all upgraded. So, and that happened. And now we have these great movie houses to go to. I think it really comes down to the product That's what affects it. And also the in-theater experience is very important. I think theater owners have by and large today done a great job. And of course, if they just would put more small movies in some of those theaters, we'd love it even more. But I think that that's a way when you don't have to worry about your sight line, when you can kick back in your huge seat and enjoy the movie. That's like when you fly first class, you're a lot more excited to travel. And that's how it feels when you go to one of these movie theaters that has that. But certainly television impacted the business. The home video revolution in the 80s, the home theater revolution in the 90s, but remember back in the 90s, I remember people saying that it was the end of the theater, the movie theater. I've heard this so many times in my career over, all these decades of my career.
It was mostly theater owners too, right? This is the end. I'm hanging it up.
Well, the thing is, a lot of them, that's why a lot of theater owners don't like the idea of day and date release, meaning, a movie available on the small screen and in the theater on the same day. They're protective of their business. You've got companies like Netflix and Amazon releasing, and Hulu, but particularly, like Netflix with Mudbound releasing in 17 theaters this weekend, Beasts of No Nation last year. You've got small screen providers getting into the movie theater, well, not the movie theater business, but in the business of releasing movies that if it's something like Manchester by the Sea, they can have both on the small screen and the big screen and might even get Academy Award nominations. So we're in a world that's constantly changing. We have more content on more platforms, available on more devices than any time in our history. And the fact that people still go to the movies to the degree they do shows the singularity of that movie going experience, that it's not going anywhere. And that sometimes it's just a habit. I mean, you want to go because of a certain movie, but sometimes I just love going to the movies, man. Just sitting there with that flickering light and the whole thing. If it's a really, really bad movie, it's 2 hours you can't get back. As we all know.
We've all been there. Yeah.
But if you love the movies, you got to support the movie theater. That's our side of the bargain. But it's also incumbent upon the studios to create the best possible movies and the theaters to provide a great experience. We all have to work together in this. That may sound kind of Pollyanna, but I mean, it really is true. If you want to keep seeing movies in theaters, keep supporting them. But if the industry wants you to keep going, you have to have a great experience while you're there. And hopefully it's a fantastic movie that you want to see again, or again, eventually buy or rent or download on home video. Then you get 2 bites of the apple from the audience. And let's face it too, when you're there at the movie theater, the concessions are a big part of the profit margins for theaters. And now they've introduced great food. And to me, the greatest, you were asking what maybe is the single greatest achievement in innovation. Alcohol, my friends.
Oh, yes.
Alcohol.
Hallelujah.
I'm telling you, when I saw
It's about
Logan
time.
and he's drinking whiskey and I'm drinking whiskey, that's the embodiment of 4D. I was so happy. I'm like him. It was great. So
That's awesome.
that's just the coolest thing to me, is just the ability to see a movie in a great environment. But there's nothing better, as we know, than seeing a great movie with other people. Even if they're not people that in that communal environment in the theater. Now I'm going to get off my preaching and I'll stand off my soapbox. But I really do love the movies. But we need good movies to watch. That's part of it.
Let's scoot one more soapbox up for you. Are you a movie pass holder? And what's your thought?
No, I mean, I'm not against it. I'm not for it. I don't know enough about it. I think to me, anything like that, if you use it, that's great. I think a lot of people buy things that give you a value add by, you're getting a volume, you're getting many tickets for one flat rate. I found that most scenarios with that, I'm not casting any aspersions on MoviePass, but a lot of scenarios like that, if you don't use it, then you're not getting the value out of it. I know that
that's the model, right?
Well,
they count on it.
Yeah, it's
right?
like going to the gym, right?
Exactly.
They rely on those people.
I have kept many a gym afloat, gentlemen. I have done that. It's on the weight of that is on my
burns
back.
Calories, so
Yeah,
That's right.
it's but that look, anything to get more people in the theater is great for concessions and all that. Yeah. Some of the big theater chains have come out against it, and remember, they could do some of these. They have loyalty programs and different things they can do on their own. I just look at it as another way to try and get people excited to go to the movie theater. Because remember, it doesn't mean that going to the movie theater is a less than experience to try and do this volume pricing or give some sort of deal. It just means that in this world where we have so many options, sometimes you got to nudge people to go out to the theater. But then there's certain movies like The Last Jedi where you don't have to nudge them. They're going to be running to go to the theater on that weekend. So, but not every movie is that movie. Not every movie is that kind of an event. And one other quick thing is that I found in our data that the movies that did terribly in theaters or got awful reviews do really well when they hit home video. They're always at the top of the chart because why? People who maybe didn't want to take a chance on a movie because they either read bad reviews or they thought the movie looked terrible or whatever. Guess what? In the privacy of their own home, they have no problem renting or buying that movie out of curiosity. So that gives a second bit of life to some movies. Clearly, some of which did not deserve to do well in the theater. But hey, man, there are a lot of people I go back to a lot of people worked on those movies. Nobody sets out to make a bomb. Nobody working on a movie knows what their score is going to be when that movie's over. Nobody has a clue. And then that's a way for people to at least see movies that they might have been curious about.
Well, we're getting about time to wrapping this up, but we have one more question for you, and I think it may be the most enjoyable one to talk about. What is your favorite movie? You've talked about Logan being maybe in your top 10, but what's your all-time favorite?
My all-time favorite, I just got to go back to it every single time, is Goodfellas.
Oh, there you go.
I know it's just one of those movies that's probably on everyone's list, but it stands the test of time. And actually, funnily, or if that's a word, this year was like the 37th anniversary. There was some weird anniversary of it. And I got to talk about the movie to a journalist. And I was just like a little kid talking about it. If you go back, to me, it's one of those few movies. You know, there are very few perfect, quote unquote, movies where the beginning, the middle, and the end are perfect. And the music and the narration, you know, the voiceover and everything. To me, it was perfect. But I'll tell you, Royal Tenenbaums is on my list. I mean, I've got a really diverse list of movies. But if you're going to pin me down to one movie, it still remains and probably always will be Goodfellas.
Great choice. That is fantastic.
Thing of beauty.
Yep.
This has been an awesome conversation, Paul. Thank you so much for coming out to represent, man.
Talk to you guys all night. We got to meet at a bar.
We got it. I think as dangerous as that may be, we got to make that happen. So tell us where you want us to send people who want to learn more about you and about your work.
So I'm on Twitter, and it's at P Dergarabedian. It's really very original, but I'm not hard to find. But yeah, it's at P Degarabedian. I post on there a lot. That's pretty much it. I'm not giving out my home phone number because I don't want people complaining that they
you've already had that
words literally outside of Missouri or anything like that. But I just, I love movies and I love people who love movies. So it's just, it's a passion.
Well, I hope this isn't the last time we talk to you, man. Will you come back and join us again?
You got it. Guaranteed.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
We appreciate your time.
All
Thank
right,
you
gentlemen.
so much. Paul Degarabedian, Comscore. Look for links in the show notes. And thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. You know the drill. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
It's hard to believe that we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
I was so excited for our big Star Trek film franchise series this season. All those movies adapted from Gene Roddenberry's original 1960s TV show.
As a huge fan, I know that you geeked out over analyzing the adaptations.
Absolutely. From the motion picture to the Kelvin timeline films, seeing the Enterprise crews on the big screen was a dream come true.
Our list of source material isn't just all books and plays. We have the original series in our list of source material. You can rent the episodes to watch and enjoy and support the show in the process.
For our Millennium Trilogy series, we covered films adapted from the original books that launched Lisbeth Salander, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Girl Who Played with Fire, and The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest.
As much as I love Fincher's version, the original Swedish versions are the way to go. We also did our Die Hard series in season 7.
I can't believe Die Hard and Die Hard 2 were adaptations. 2 of the greatest action movies ever.
Well, one of them at least. The other is awfully fun, though. We revisited the classic Mary Poppins for our 1960s movie musical series. A spoonful of sugar always helps the medicine go down.
Old Boy was intense for our Park Chan-wook Vengeance trilogy, and East of Eden and Giant were highlights of our James Dean series.
And a fun time travel mind bender with Predestination to cap things off.
Find all the books behind these adaptations and more at thenextreel.com/originals.
Dive into the source material for your favorite movies. Check it out today, thenextreel.com/originals.